it's Abigail of the Black Book Space. We're going to be talking about 5 books today, and it's going to help us answer the question, is the quirky black girl trope overused? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So make sure you get some water, some wine, some juice, whatever you feel like drinking or sipping on right now while we talk about these books. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and make sure you grab your ticket to the epic book chat, because we're going to be talking about The Other Black Girl, celebrating that book, and I really want you to be there. So come on back. Speaking of The Other Black Girl, that is the book that we will be talking about first. So it's right here, The Other Black Girl. That is the name of this book, and it centers around the character named Nella, who is pretty quirky. Like, she wears her kids every day. She's not worried too much about her hair. She's just very different. She works in a very white space, and she's not, I feel like, the most confident of ladies. So in that respect, I consider her pretty quirky, just a bit of a nerd, loves reading her books. She doesn't stand up for herself very much. So with that regard, I wonder if Nella was more of an assertive lady, would she still have a place in this book? And I think she would. She'd definitely have a place in this book, but she may not be the character who goes through the things that Nella goes through. She'd be more maybe Nella's best friend, was a lot more assertive than her. She wouldn't be herself. And I think it really helps to make the story what it is. So I like Nella in the story. I really wish, though, in some respects, she had been a little bit more assertive, because I think that that would have really helped her to, in the end, you know, not suffer the situation that she ended up suffering. So it was a little sad in that respect, but I still love her the way she is, and you know, we wish her the best. It's kind of sad the way things ended. Next book we're talking about, I think we needed this quirky nerdy black girl trope again, because we're talking about Taylor in The Dating Playbook. So this story is all about Taylor, who meets this wonderful guy because she is a personal trainer. When you're an entrepreneur, I think you have to be a bit quirky. You can't be like everybody else. You have to think outside of the box a little bit. If Taylor had been one of those girls who always played by the book, she wouldn't have gotten the guy, which is not, of course, the most important part of the story, but it's pretty important since it's a romance novel. She wouldn't have, you know, changed her business into what it was. She was having issues with it, though, because she ended up, you know, being afraid to go back to school because of her dyslexia. Because of that, she wasn't a certified personal trainer, and she ended up losing a position because of that. So that was a little quirky in and of itself. That was one of her idiosyncrasies. She was kind of individual in that respect, because she felt like her learning disability or her learning difference would keep her from succeeding in the personal fitness space. So because of that, I feel like had she been different, a little more confident in herself, things would have gone really different, and I think the book would have, you know, still worked out really well. But I really liked Taylor. I liked her quirkiness. I liked how different she was. I liked how she was unapologetically herself, just really all about this fitness, having these classes in the park, and I loved it. Moving on, this is one of my favorite books of all time. Take a hint, Dani Brown. So Dani Brown is the second of the 3 Brown sisters. She's the middle child, so of course I have a special place in my heart for her. Really like her a lot, and I think that one of my favorite things about her is that she's unapologetically herself, and that in and of itself, that's what quirky means, right? So she's got the pink hair. As you can see, if you look really close, she has a rose quartz around her neck, so she's into the crystals. Very big, bubbly personality, which is pretty different because she's a PhD student and she is a professor. Normally they're kind of straight-laced and, you know, prim and proper. She was not at all, and I think that really worked for this book because her love interest, Zafir, was kind of dark, brooding. He had gone through something, a really depressive stage in his life. I won't spoil what exactly happened. I really want you to read the book, but because of that, because of what he went through, I think he really needed someone a little more bubbly to balance him out, and that was Dani in this case. So I really loved her personality. I think that they fit really well together, and in this case, the quirky trope was not overbearing. It did not seem out of place in this book. It seemed right at home, and it was fantastic. I highly recommend it. So I highly recommend all of Talia Hibbard's books. This was the second one, I believe. Take a hint, Dani Brown. It's the one that I read first. Not completely sure which order they go in, but you need to read all of them. So there is Get a Life, Chloe Brown, Take a Hint, Danny Brown. And then the next one, Act Your Age, Eve Brown. This is one of the funniest books I have ever read in my entire life. I love Eve Brown. She is the youngest of the sisters, and in this book she decides to kind of go off on her own, try to find her own job. Too many adventures happen, including her meeting a wonderful man named Jacob, who's on the autistic spectrum. So there were two quirky people in this book, double the quirkiness, and we love that because they fit well together. They learned a lot from each other. And they were just, I know I say this a lot, but they were unapologetically themselves. And I think that's what made this beautiful. Neither of them were trying to be something that they weren't, especially Jacob. He was very all about the business. Everything has to be done just so. He had his own manual written for his bed and breakfast that he ran. Things had to be run prim and proper. And he actually had to get Eve to help him run it because she ended up almost killing this man. It was so sad. So poor guy. It actually is pretty comical the way it happened. But this poor guy, I'm so happy he actually survived her because it got pretty crazy. So I have an entire blog post dedicated, which I will link below, to this book about 5 of the funniest things that Eve actually said in this book. But this quote was actually pretty profound, and I wanted to read it to you because this speaks to her quirkiness as well. She thought to herself, enjoyment was something Eve rarely considered when it came to the world of work. Work was something you did to try and feel useful until you effed it up. Work was something you did to help the people around you until you weren't needed anymore. Work was not something you enjoyed in and of itself because that would only make the situation worse when everything collapsed. There are so many limiting beliefs in here, and you can tell it speaks to her anxiety. Things that many of us probably think about on a regular basis in regards to work. How we're not supposed to be having fun. You're here to work, you're here to get the job done, that's it. And you most likely won't do as well as you think you're going to. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? When is this going to end? Because obviously it's too good to be true. Those are the types of anxious thoughts that many of us have. And Eve had these that she was keeping to herself. But when they come up in literature like this, it kind of allows us to sit and think about it. Do a little shadow work on our own. Kind of think about, do I think this way? Yeah, I think that way too. Well, why do I think this way? That's why I really love this book, because it opened up some thoughts in our mind. So, Act Your Age, Eve Brown. Yes, we definitely needed this quirky girl to be in this book. She was a lot more straight-laced. She probably wouldn't have tolerated Jacob as well, which is unkind completely, but I think that's the way it is. That's why she needed to be who she was in this book. Last but not least, this book is called And They Lived Happily Ever After. So this one has a special place in my heart because it's one of the books that I read recently, I think last year, that was from an author outside of the United States. I have found that books like that, books written by people outside of the United States, are a lot softer, just very classy and elegant. That's how I feel. I feel like it can get a little rough in the United States, and that comes through in some of the books that we write as well. So I enjoyed this book because it dealt with the supernatural. So Gaia is our main character. She is an author, which I love books where there is an author as the main character. I feel like that's such a cool way to write things. That's something I'll have to blog about as well, something we'll have to talk about maybe at an epic book chat or definitely on the channel at some time. Gaia is a quirky girl, very, very shy. So from what I remember, she either had never been in a relationship before or the one she was in didn't end well, and it was one that she'd had a long time ago. She'd given up on love, so she wrote about it in her stories and was able to experience it that way. I thought that was really cool. She was one of those never been kissed type of girls, so really shy, late bloomer, very incredibly anxious, and a lot of that had to do with some trauma that she dealt with when she was in the foster system. Normally that is a story that authors don't touch very often, at least not in the romantic sector, so I really enjoyed this author being brave enough to do it. And actually, one of the fun thing about this, see the small world that we're a part of, the quote on the front says, achingly real, unexpected, whimsical, and wholly original. New York Times bestseller Talia Hibbert, author of Act Your Age, Eve Brown, and Take a Hint, Danny Brown, right? So she wrote these books, and she gave her this beautiful quote to put on the front of her book, which I love, and she's a New York Times bestseller, so we got the big names in this list right now. I really liked what she said about this book because she's right. I've never read a book before where somebody is writing and creating their own reality like that. So that's kind of cool. It's lending itself to the law of attraction and scripting, and we love that on this channel. all the meditation and things like that. I highly recommend this book. Yes, this girl is very quirky, very anxious, complete introvert, to the point where one of her best friends invited her to a party. She was out for 5 minutes and she's thinking about, okay, I think I've been here long enough, and she goes to hide in his bedroom rather than interacting with the people at the party. So super interesting, I thought. And that's something that many of us probably deal with. We're not always ready, you know, as introverts, when it's like, okay, so I've been invited to a party a week from now. What am I going to wear? Am I really going to go? Do I really want to go? How far is it from here? Things like that. That's what she dealt with in this book. And again, that's what I love so much about this type of literature. It speaks to real things that people deal with that they don't always have a way to describe. And I love that. So these are the 5 books that we talked about, and I think overall, my opinion, the quirky black girl trope is a beautiful one, and at this point it's not overused, but I would hope that it isn't one that's being used in place of other tropes that we need to see, such as the depressed black girl, the anxious black girl. Those tropes actually came up a lot in here, but the overarching one was her being a little quirky, and that comes out in different ways, and I love that. I think that we're just very multifaceted people, and it's wonderful to see us portrayed that way in literature. The way that we're able to be portrayed that way is because the books are written by people that look like us. So if you're looking to talk about more books like that with me, with other people, other like-minded people, you have to come to the Epic Book Chat. It's happening on June 11th. I'm so excited. We're going to be talking about this book, The Other Black Girl. Talk about Nella and all her quirkiness and all the things she should have done differently. I'm really looking forward to that. Whatever you do today, I hope it's something that brings you joy. Bye.